In the program this afternoon, I have with me on the line Crystal Wallace, who is an Eastern Palliative Care Volunteer Consultant, and we're going to find out a little bit about the Eastern Volunteer Organisation. Welcome to the program,
Thanks,
Crystal.
Brian. I really love the fact that you've invited us to come on and talk about the work that we do, because we love the work we do.
Well, tell us about some of the work that you do. I know that at the time when people really need your care, you are there and you are basically the angels from heaven.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Oh, you've made my day today. Yeah, so the organisation I work for is called Eastern Palliative Care, or EPC, and we are based in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. We're working everywhere from Kew through to the Yarra Ranges, and basically we're in place to look after people who need palliative care support, so they're dying, but look after them in their own homes. The beauty about that means that they can stay at home for some of their medical treatments, and they can also choose home as the place that they want to die. If they decide that they would prefer to be in hospital or in a hospice, then our organisation is the one that will help get them into that space as well. We have a huge team of a variety of staff that work at Eastern Palliative Care, so not only is there nursing and medical services, we've also got social workers, pastoral care workers, psychologists, music and massage therapist, occupational therapy, and you know, this is stuff that often people can't access unless they go into hospital. And of course, when you're at the end of your life, you're extremely tired, you're extremely sick, your carers are very tired and worn out too, and probably the last thing you feel like is trekking down to the hospital yet again to access some of this. So because we're involved, people are able to stay at home for longer, as I said, and also choose to stay at home for their place of death. We also have a massive team of volunteers who work with us. So we've got over 216 volunteers, and they work across a range of programs as well. The beauty about them is they're working for free, so they're walking into someone's house at a time when things are really emotionally charged, and it's a very vulnerable space as well, and yet they're walking in and saying, you know what, we see you, we think you're really important, and we just want to be here with you. So it can make an enormous difference to not just the clients, but also their carers who we look after as well.
That's what I was going to say, Crystal. It's not only the patient, but you also care for the carer, the person that's got all the worry, and you are such a comfort to those people as well.
Well, you know, that's part of the mandate of palliative care, is not just to be working with the person who's dying, but to recognise who are the important people in their social networks, who are their carers, their primary carers, and to support them, because it can be a very exhausting journey for them as well, as you can imagine. And so for them, it's quite comforting, firstly, to have people on the end of the phone to answer their questions, and we have a 24-hour service, so they can ring us at any time, day or night, to get help. That's around the medical help that they might need. But also, as I said, to have this army of people walking in to say, it's okay, you can do it, you're doing a fantastic job, here's what your next step is, just take this step. And one of the carers, or the care support systems that our volunteers actually help with, is people's pets, which might sound a bit odd, but there are a lot of people out there for whom their pets actually form part of their care support system. But of course, when you're sick and when you're dying, you don't have the energy anymore to be able to get out and walk the dog or care for the dog as you once did, and yet you love that dog so much because he's part of your family. So that's one of the spaces our volunteers will move in and help exercise the animal, just to keep things settled in the home as well.
Crystal, just recently you were very fortunate. You got the Minister for Health's Volunteering Award.
We did.
Tell us about that.
That was so exciting. So that was awarded to our biography volunteer team. We've got 94 people who work in that team, and their role is to get in with our clients and actually help them write their stories. We've now published over 1,000 people's stories. We don't keep those, and when I say publish, we publish them and give them back to the clients. It belongs to them, not to us. But, you know, that's an enormous number of people who've had the chance to be heard, to be seen, to be valued, to tell their story. A lot of them say to us later on that they experience, because of that whole process of storytelling, which is actually quite a relaxing process, they find that their levels of anxiety and depression, breathlessness and pain also drops. So there's a lot of therapeutic value that sits behind our biography program. And of course people's self-esteem goes up and they feel like they're able to create something to give back to their family and to the carers as well. If I can I tell you a few of the stories
yes.
that we've worked with? Yeah. So I've changed the names just to protect people's identities. But I can remember one gentleman, he was in his late 70s, and I'll call him Arthur. And he was actually one of the Aegean refugees in World War II. He was Macedonian, and he was telling his biographer that at the age of 10, the Greek army came in and occupied their whole area. And as part of that occupation, what they did was they actually changed everyone's names to make them more Greek-sounding and then destroyed their original identity papers. So from the age of 10 to the age of 77, he was known by this Greek-sounding name. So when they got to the end of the biographer said to him, well, what name would you like on this? And he sort of looked at her a bit bewildered and said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, do you want your Greek-sounding name or would you like your original name back on the document? And of course that's what he chose, and tears were just streaming down his cheeks because, you know, in his last days, one of our biographers had managed to sort of give him back his identity that was so important to him. I'm thinking of another young dad, so we work with a lot of young parents who are dying, and gosh, that's a difficult space for them because not only do they have to think about the fact that they are dying, but they're also having to face the fact that they're not going to be there for their children. Then they're going to miss the first days of school, you know, when their kids turn 16, getting the driver's license, all of that. And so we do a lot of work with them. And this father created his what we call adult version story, so all PG of course, but it's written in a way that it's not accessible for children, say, who are 5, and he had a 5-year-old son. Then we helped him create what's called the children's picture book version, so it's a cut down version that the 5-year-old would be able to understand using language for Stephen, the son. And it was interesting because while they were creating that, the biographer noticed that every so often Mark, the father, would turn to the digital voice recorder and start shaking his finger at it and saying, now you listen here, Stephen, when you're 18 and you fall in love, you must go and talk with Auntie Annie. She's going to be the best person to help. And you must go to university, and here's why. And she realised something, and she said to Mark, would you like us to create a third version of your story, one for 15-year-old Stephen? And that was exactly what he wanted and exactly what we did. So, you know, we cross the span in so many different ways, but what we allow our clients to do is to be remembered, and I think that's something that echoes in all of our souls. If we're truthful at 3 o'clock in the morning and we're facing the fact that we will die sometime, you know, we all ask that question: who will remember me, and will I be remembered? And the biography program allows people to get that sense that yes, they have been here, they have done well, and they are going to be remembered.
Well, now that leads me into my next segment of this interview, and that's with Chrissy Robinson, because her mother had motor neurone disease, but she was also a biographer. And welcome to the program, Chrissy.
Thanks, Brian. Mum developed motor neurone disease when she was 64, which was quite a shock to us because nobody in our family had ever had that disease. She wasn't a biographer, but she was a personal carer for people in aged care, so she had a lot of a caring heart. But part of the shame of her developing this disease at that point in her life was she also had worked with some people with motor neurone disease, so she sort of knew what was coming, and it was a very scary time for her. Hugely supported by Eastern Palliative Care with a lot of their different workers, and it had a huge impact on our family.
Now, there was she was not only just a person with motor neurone disease and a person wanting to do a biography, but your mother couldn't talk. Is that right?
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and I suppose lots of people couldn't imagine how can a woman who can no longer speak actually write or have written her biography. My brothers are very technical, and they'd made her we called it a laser pointer, so it was a laser on top of a headband that she wore. And because I was an office administrator, I got really gung-ho and made a whole lot of laminated signs for the wall around her room, lots of phrases, but also the whole alphabet. And it was a long process, as you can imagine, but she would start spelling out the stories. What I didn't realise in the process was how key my relationship with her would be. So as she tired or as she started telling a story, maybe it was about when we lived in Malaysia, I would say Malaysia. I went to tell a story about Malaysia and she'd nod. So this helped her to share it. But Fiona, our biographer, was extraordinary, and I didn't realise how she would be able to get these stories out, but she did. One thing that amazed me also was over the course of Mum's disease, as she became more and more incapable of normal function, so she lost the ability to use her hands and her voice very early. But then eventually, throughout the disease, she lost the use of her legs also. So she became very, very much needing me all the time. And by that point of the biography, I was feeling quite isolated. I wasn't really her daughter anymore. I was more her carer. And having our biographer come in and include me in the process of doing the biography with Mum just brought me back into that space of being Mum's daughter again. And it really helped us to reconnect in that space. And even after Fiona would leave, Mum would want to tell me other stories and, you know, get me to fill in some of the gaps that we didn't do in the session and pull photos out. And it was just an amazing experience of reconnection for us.
Chrissy, we know and we read a lot about motor neurone disease through the footballers and that type of thing. But it's a wretched disease because it creeps up, doesn't it? It doesn't sort of hit you and you've got it. It sort of creeps.
Well, Mum was a bit more of an unusual one. She had what's called a fast-moving one, so hers was very immediate. So by the time we realised she had it, she'd already lost most of her speech, her ability to swallow, and most of the use of her hands. But she was an amazing woman, and just having that assistance from Eastern Palliative Care, you know, when she was really sick overnight, just having that knowledge that I could call the nurses.
Yes.
Just to clarify anything that was really hard. You know, this was this very agile woman who all of a sudden was unable to move, meant she couldn't move in bed, so she did develop things like bed sores, and I had no idea what to do, you know, but I had these professionals who could answer questions, pop in the morning with some dressings, help me through that process. So to feel like I was part of a team was a really important thing for me, and I think that's one of the great assets of Eastern Palliative Care, both with the staff and the volunteers. You feel like as a carer you're part of a team, not just out there on your own.
Well, it's a wonderful story, and I thank you for relating it to us today.
Thanks, Brian.
And it was great to talk to you. Now, if I can go back to Crystal, with the Eastern Palliative Care, you're always, no doubt, wanting volunteers?
Yeah, we are. We're always fundraising and we're always wanting volunteers. So those are the two areas that the public can help us. We train volunteers once a year, and in August we're going to be starting our recruitment season again, of course. But people are most welcome to call us. I can give you the number now. It's 1300 130 813 if they'd like to volunteer with us, and we'll happily walk them through that process. Or, you know, if they want to donate as well to Eastern Palliative Care, we'd love to hear from them. Call the same number, 1300 130 813, and again, we'd be delighted to hear from them around that as well.
Look, it's been really wonderful, you two ladies, coming to the program this afternoon and telling us a little bit more about Eastern Palliative Care. Over the years, we've talked a lot about it on the station with fundraisers and different things that you've been organising, but to actually get down now to this, what probably people don't even, or hadn't even heard about, was the Eastern Palliative Care biography program.
Yeah.
It's just amazing what you people do, and I thank you very, very much for the information that you've given us today.
Thank you for this opportunity, Brian. We appreciate that.
My guests in the program this afternoon have been Crystal Wallace, the Eastern Palliative Care volunteer consultant, and also Chrissy Robinson. And Chrissy told us of her mum's biography and her story. Thank you very much, ladies, and we wish you well with your work and hope it continues for a long, long time.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.